The Kansas City Approach to Modern Money Theory by L. Randall Wray. Introduction. The birth of modern money theory, MMT, can be traced to an online discussion group of the 1990s, Post-Keynesian Thought, PKT. Warren Mosler, a hedge fund manager, joined Post-Keynesian Thought in January 1996. He had drafted a paper, Soft Currency Economics, Mosler, 1996. Footnote 1. Soft currency refers to a currency that is not pegged, what MMT calls a sovereign currency. End footnote. Within the first few weeks, he laid out the basic principles of the analysis of a sovereign currency. Taxes create a demand for the sovereign's currency. Bond sales by the sovereign are not really a borrowing operation, but rather are used to drain excess reserves from the banking system. The sovereign cannot run out of its own currency, and government ought to provide jobs at minimum wages to fight unemployment. While many of the participants of post-Keynesian thought were unreceptive or even hostile to the ideas, a few recognized foundations for these arguments within heterodox economics. Those who were generally supportive included Basil Moore, associated with the horizontalist wing of endogenous money, Paul Davidson, among the fundamentalist Keynesians, Bill Mitchell, who had much earlier developed a buffer stock approach to unemployment, Matt Forstater, who would act as our economic historian and historian of economic thought, and whose student Pavlina Cherneva was recruited to write a review of Warren's Soft Currency Economics paper, and me. Footnote 2. Pavlina would later act as the associate director of CFEPS, the Center for Full Employment and Price Stability. End footnote. Soon after this initial introduction on PKT, Warren and Pavlina organized a conference held at Bretton Woods in June 1996. Basil, Charles Goodhart, and I joined Warren and a number of financial markets participants and a few regulators to propagate a new framework for macro policy analysis. Warren convinced me to write a new book, Ray 1998, to lay out the foundations providing financial support. Two research centers were soon set up. Bill Mitchell created the Center of Full Employment. Bill Mitchell created the Center of Full Employment and Equity, COFFEE, at the University of Newcastle, Australia. And Warren, Matt, and I created the Center for Full Employment and Price Stability, CFEPS. Footnote 3. We first tried to house it at the University of Denver, but that did not work out. It was temporarily housed at the Levy Economics Institute and then moved to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC. Pavlina moved with CFEPS to UMKC. Stephanie Bell Kelton also worked with CFEPS at Levy and then moved to UMKC. Many UMKC students have contributed to the development of MMT, including Joël Leclerc on budget deficits, 2008, Eric Timoine on central banking and asset markets, 2009, Zdravka Todorova on money and gender, 2009, Flavia Dantas and Yeva Nersisyan on shadow banking, Nersisyan and Dantas, 2017, Fadil Kapoub on the job guarantee for developing countries, 2012, and Philippe Rezende on MMT for Brazil, 2009. Bill Black joined the UMKC Economics Department in the mid-2000s and introduced white-collar control fraud as a contributing cause to financial crises, Black, 2014. Jan Kriegel taught as a distinguished visiting professor for many years, adding a deep understanding of financial markets. John Henry also taught history of thought in the program, deepening, as Minsky put it, our understanding of, quote, the giants on whose shoulders we stand, end quote. See Bell, Henry, and Wray 2004, as well as contributed pieces on the use of money in early Egypt. See Henry 2004. Recently, Caroline Teixeira Georges completed her dissertation as a visiting scholar at Levy, strengthening the application of MMT to the case of Brazil, Georges 2020. At Levy, Dimitri Papadimitriou has supported work on MMT and the job guarantee for 3 decades. End footnote. Later, Bill opened a European branch of coffee in Maastricht. Many conferences and seminars were held at Coffee, Levy, and CFEPS over the years, not to only refine our analysis, but also to locate the foundations of MMT in the various heterodox traditions. In what follows, I will lay out the Kansas City approach. That is, the research developed at the Levy Institute and University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC. Footnote 4. In the early period, our approach was usually called chartalist or neo-chartalist by some critics, and often labeled the Kansas City approach in the Americas. Obviously, an unfair designation that left out the contributions of Bill and his group in Australia. The term modern money theory, also called modern monetary theory by some proponents, did not come along until much later. Bill Mitchell credits a commentator on his Billy blog for the term, even though I had used the term modern money in the title of the first academic monograph. I prefer to use money rather than monetary, both because it was the word I had used in the title, but also because the scope of MMT is not confined to monetary economics, as that term is usually applied. Many critics have wrongly seen MMT as some new form of monetarism, with an undue focus on monetary policy. For example, central bank money printing to pay for spending. The correct emphasis is on modern money, that is, the operation of the modern sovereign currency system. End footnote. The parallel development of the Newcastle approach of coffee was similar, but began from different heterodox foundations, as did Mosler's own original creation that relied primarily on real-world observations from working in sovereign bond markets. By focusing on the path to MMT in America, I am not privileging that over the other two. Along the way, we were in nearly constant contact, and our different backgrounds allowed us to make progress quickly. From Warren's first post in early January 1996, a handful of researchers had put together the foundations of a new approach to macroeconomics by mid-1998. Barely 20 years later, MMT had achieved something quite rare for heterodox economics. It was in the headlines all over the world, and in quick succession, first denounced by all respectable policymakers, politicians, and economists, and then suddenly embraced as the necessary response to a global pandemic. Footnote 5. See Nersessian and Wray, 2020. For an example of a quick turnaround, see Buter, 2020, who argues, quote, much of the U.S. response will come in the form of helicopter money, an application of modern monetary theory, MMT, in which the central bank finances fiscal stimulus by purchasing government debt issued to finance tax cuts or public spending increases, end quote. The Washington Post, Von Drehill 2020 acknowledges this quick conversion. Quote, a year ago, Modern monetary theory, MMT, was still the crazy uncle at the economics tea party, spouting wild ideas and unapproved theories about the almost magical spending powers of the US federal government. Nurtured at out of the way academics, Nurtured at out of the way academies such as the Levy Economics Institute of Bard College and the University of Missouri, Kansas City, MMT has received scant support from mainstream thinkers, though the left wing, likes of Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, have been buzzing about it for years. Mainstream or not, suddenly everyone's an MMTist, even if they don't cop it openly, even though if they don't cop to it openly. End quote. In an article praising the decision to direct the Bank of England to provide direct finance of the government's response to the pandemic, The Guardian 2020 writes, quote, Randall Wray, an academic whose modern monetary theory owes much to Lerner, writes that it is ironic that the real limits faced by the government before the pandemic hit were far less constraining than the limits faced after the virus had brought a huge part of our productive capacity to a halt. What is possible in dealing with coronavirus can be paid for. Money is not the issue. End footnote.